The story begins with a first officer named Ben, whose wife keeps calling him home, both of them carrying the weight of their sick son, and she begs him to stop running away from it all. Meanwhile at the airport a passenger named Dan slips a power bank into his red bag as smoke curls up from a faulty charging cable, something completely against the rules for checked luggage. As Ben moves through the terminal he meets a nervous little girl named Cora who asks if he's the captain, and he replies he's only the first officer. She teases that he seems too old not to be captain yet, and he shrugs it off saying life throws you a few detours sometimes. She's traveling with her father, her stepmother, and her younger stepbrother Finn, her real mother having placed a tracker on her clothes so she can follow her location from a phone. Through pure negligence that red bag slips past security scanning and gets loaded into a cargo container. Aboard this same flight from Los Angeles to Shanghai is a group of esports players, and one American player named Hutch starts mocking his Chinese rivals until his coach pulls him aside to apologize. Up front in the cockpit sits an aging pilot named Richard, and soon the plane lifts off. We learn along the way that Ben was once discharged from the Air Force after striking a superior officer who ignored proper protocol, costing him his entire pension and every benefit he'd earned, which is exactly how he ended up flying for a lower-tier airline. Among the esports players, Lily asks her captain Sam why he won't read her letter, and he insists he isn't scared at all, promising he'll read it once they land in China. Then he heads to the restroom where he's hidden her letters safely inside his phone case. Elsewhere Cora's father pleads with her to be kinder to Finn, but she ignores him completely, clearly resenting her stepmother. He and the stepmother eventually head toward the restroom together, but inside that very restroom the faulty cable finally sparks into flame. Meanwhile Finn asks Cora where their parents went, and she carelessly points him toward the restroom, claiming there's a pool over there, so instead he wanders into the next section and sits beside a stranger playing a video game, joining right in. Up in the cockpit an alarm suddenly warns of fire down in the cargo hold, and the moment Ben spots it he triggers the suppression bottles, but they fail to work properly, so he radios in requesting the nearest suitable airport. Learning that Guam sits roughly 400 nautical miles to the south, Cora heads toward the restroom hoping to reach her father while two crew members battle the flames below with extinguishers, but the fire burns through the restraining straps and the container slides forward, crashing into a set of pressurized cylinders, tearing open the fuselage and sending debris flying through the cabin. Though Lily manages to grab hold of Cora just in time, oxygen masks drop above every seat as Cora's parents lie unconscious back in the restroom. More people are knocked out by flying wreckage, yet somehow Richard manages to level the aircraft at a safer altitude, announcing that everyone can remove their masks. Dan rises from his seat while Sam bolts out toward Lily, only for an attendant to force him back down since running through the cabin is too dangerous. Meanwhile Dan sits smoking inside a restroom of his own. Then the burning container slams into an engine, tearing it apart and ripping open another hole, sucking people right out into the open sky. The flight controls stop responding entirely as they're now stranded over open ocean, and to make things worse the second engine catches fire too, killing their power and radio, so Ben deploys the ram air turbine to bring the instruments back online. Cora tries running toward her parents but gets grabbed by an attendant instead. Richard decides to attempt a water landing and instructs Ben to start dumping fuel, telling everyone to brace for impact. The two of them argue over the best approach until agreeing to turn and come down parallel to the swells. Richard tells him to lock his seat all the way back and cinch his harness tight, and amid screams of terror the plane finally slams into the ocean, sliding across the surface until it strikes underwater rocks, snapping off a wing, flipping the aircraft completely upside down, and splitting it into two separate pieces as water pours in and more lives are lost on impact. Sometime later scattered wreckage and bodies drift silently while survivors cry out for rescue. Back in the cockpit Richard lies unconscious as the windshield threatens to give way under crushing pressure. The attendant Penny has kept a firm grip on Cora this entire time, staring in shock at the wreckage surrounding them. Penny tells her to wait right there before heading into the cockpit to help Ben free Richard, who wakes just long enough to suggest cutting himself loose with the crash axe. Over in the midsection Sam realizes Lily isn't in her seat and starts shouting her name. The tail section floats upside down with Finn, a stranger, and attendant Zoe trapped inside, while Lily herself swims through the wreckage with a bleeding leg until she climbs onto a floating piece of debris. Back in the cockpit they simply cannot free Richard in time, and Ben can't bring himself to cut off the man's leg since he'd bleed out immediately, so Richard tells him to seal the door shut and get out so the flooding stays contained, saying it's his plane now, go home, be with his son, and to check the ELT before he leaves. Ben takes one last look outside where most of the tail section passengers have already died. Inside the restroom Finn's mother finally wakes and rouses Cora's father, but the second they crack the door open water comes rushing in. Back in the cockpit, Richard gazes at a photo of his family moments before the glass finally gives way and the ocean claims him too. In the tail section, an elderly woman named Becky regains consciousness, realizing they'll need to climb higher as the water keeps rising. Knowing the ELT sits in the midsection, Ben decides he'll have to swim there himself, leaving the raft behind for Penny and Cora. Though Penny insists on going instead since she used to be a competitive swimmer, and Cora begs to come along too, desperate to find her family, but Penny tells her to stay put and watch over her shoes. Once she's gone, Cora spots sharks circling in the water and screams out warnings that never reach her, so Ben paddles the raft toward Penny alongside Cora. Meanwhile, the tail section survivors are only alive thanks to a pocket of trapped air, knowing that opening the door means the whole section sinks. Out on the surface, the shark closes in on Penny just as Cora's warning comes too late, and Ben tries desperately to pull her to safety, but there's nothing he can do. The shark even lunges toward their raft afterward, though Ben manages to drive it off swinging an oar. In the midsection, everyone huddles into one corner, causing the wreckage to shift and slide forward, sending one woman tumbling into the water, though she quickly claws her way back up. In the upside-down tail section, Zoe wraps a bandage around Matt's injured hand while everyone tries comforting a crying Finn. Back in the midsection, Sam announces that some of them need to get into the water to lighten the load since they're sitting on a coral reef, but Hutch flatly refuses, sparking another clash between the two of them. Even Hutch's own coach admits Sam has a point, and while teammate Jesse volunteers to move into the water, Hutch still won't budge. Meanwhile, the Peace Lily had been resting on drifts away, forcing her to swim despite her wounded leg until she finally reaches the midsection and reunites with Sam, only for a shark to suddenly attack the coach, and when Jesse tries to save him, he too falls victim. Hutch turns his anger on Sam and starts attacking him until Ben arrives just in time to pull him off. Back in the tail section, Zoe offers to dive down and search for an exit, but Matt insists on doing it himself despite his broken wrist, and though Becky pleads with him not to go, he slips into the water anyway, working his way beneath the wreckage until he surfaces screaming for help, right where he encounters Cora's father moments before a shark devours the man whole. Matt keeps screaming for rescue while back in the midsection, Ben reminds everyone how lucky they are to be alive, considering there were 293 people aboard and now barely 30 remain. He continues his search for the ELT while Cora searches separately for her father. Once Ben powers on the locator, he hands it off to Dan while rushing to save Cora from a shark lurking nearby, but one of their rafts drifts loose and water begins pouring into the midsection, and in all that chaos, Dan lets the ELT slip right out of his hands into the ocean. Meanwhile, Sam has drifted off clinging to a suitcase, laying the unconscious Hutch on top of it, and when Ben asks where the ELT went, he learns it's already gone, with Dan callously replying that if it mattered so much, Ben should have held onto it himself. Cora spots Sam floating far in the distance and realizes Ben will need to rescue him too. Right as sharks begin circling them, another survivor named Wooden refuses to risk the raft out there, punching Ben and blaming him for everything that's happened, but Ben punches right back, declaring they're going after them regardless and bringing Dan along. The sharks keep circling Sam and Hutch until Ben arrives just in time to pull them both to safety. Back in the tail section, they simply can't wait any longer for Matt to return, and though Becky refuses to leave, she insists Zoe take Finn without her, promising she'll follow later, and along the way they stumble upon Matt's lifeless body, finally breaking the surface where an unopened raft happens to be drifting nearby. Just then Lily spots a plane flying overhead and everyone waves desperately for help, but it passes right on by without noticing them. As Zoe prepares to lift Finn safely into the raft, sharks suddenly attack her, though thankfully they end up fighting each other instead, giving her just enough time to hoist him up and climb in herself with a badly bleeding leg before passing out entirely, leaving Finn all alone and terrified, screaming for anyone to help. And then the raft starts shaking violently from below as a shark rams into it, leaving him dangling dangerously off the edge. Back in the tail section, water has risen all the way to Becky's neck, and thinking of her granddaughter, she quietly prays that her life be filled with joy. Right at that moment, a rescue helicopter finally appears searching for survivors, also alerting a nearby Chinese fishing vessel to the crash site. Back on the raft, Hutch notices Sam still staring at Lily and tells him he should just admit his feelings, but Sam explains there's a strict rule forbidding players from dating one another, prompting Hutch to point out that nobody actually follows that rule anyway. Cora by now has accepted that her family didn't survive, remembering how her father asked her to watch over Finn, something she failed to do even though he's only 7, and Ben reveals his own son is also 7, showing her an old photo of the boy. Just then the helicopter swoops in close and a rescue swimmer begins descending toward the water. Ben frantically waves and shouts warnings that go completely unheard, and the instant the swimmer touches down, a shark strikes, dragging her under before yanking her back up only to seize her again in its jaws. The cable still attached sends the helicopter spinning wildly until it too crashes into the sea, flipping their raft and scattering everyone back into the water, and as Dan scrambles up he knocks a flight attendant down where sharks quickly claim her, but right then the fishing ship finally arrives, unable to get close enough due to the shallow water near the reef. Meaning Ben will have to paddle the raft over himself despite having no actual paddles, and noticing Cora isn't even on the raft anymore, he spots her standing alone on a distant piece of wreckage, so he swims toward her with a shark trailing close behind, climbing aboard and urging her to come with him, though she insists she wants to stay right there with her father, and Ben gently tells her they just need to take one small detour first, strapping her to himself before swimming onward through waters teeming with sharks. And seeing this unfold, the fishermen dump their entire catch overboard, drawing most of the sharks away toward the fish instead, though a few still close in on Ben and Cora until he fends one off with a flare gun, sending the rest scattering toward the ship to feed. Meanwhile Dan notices a pack of cigarettes floating nearby, grabs it, stretches out along the edge of the raft, and lights one up, only for a shark to claim him as its next victim, his death barely registering with anyone else. And finally everyone remaining gets pulled to safety. Sam tells Lily he never actually got around to reading her letter and that it's probably lost to the ocean now, though she knows full well he did read it and is simply holding back because of the rules, and he leans in to kiss her forehead instead. Ben makes his way over to Cora just as everyone's phones suddenly pick up signal again, prompting her to grab his phone and pull up the tracker showing Finn's location, leading them to a raft where they find an unconscious Zoe, who soon stirs awake and uncovers Finn resting right beside her, reuniting brother and sister at last as Cora tearfully apologizes to him. And in the story's final moments we learn that Ben's son has been battling cancer all along, prompting him to call his wife and speak with his boy, telling him simply that he's coming home. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a video like this.